Nick Robinson is someone who's had a knack for making a variety of viral content for years. If you know him, it's most likely for his documentaries and video essays, where he goes to extreme lengths to solve silly and rather trivial mysteries, spending an absurd amount of money doing so, which often includes booking flights to Japan. But that's not all he's known for, as he has an extensive portfolio, including a very successful Vine account that accumulated 80 million loops while Vine was around, many viral memes and tweets under his belt. He's related to successful electronic musician Porter Robinson, and he used to be an employee at Polygon starting in early 2015. Polygon is a news outlet for video games and owned by Vox Media. If you're in games journalism, working for Polygon is a big deal. If there is such a thing as prestigious outlets for video game journalism, Polygon is one of those outlets. Nick's content appeared to be very well liked by the people who consumed Polygon's content, as he produced multiple successful series for them, such as the Cool Games Inc. podcast and video series Carboys, both alongside Griffin McElroy, a very popular podcaster. But working for Polygon is not really something the general audience knows Robinson for nowadays. He would become more successful after his time there was cut short. In summer 2017, Nick Robinson would part ways from the company following a Me Too scandal. Nick Robinson seemingly would start to become disliked by his gaming journalist peers in March 2017. He would publish the following tweet, which would be controversial amongst gaming journalists for whatever reason. "No offense, but anyone who acts like they didn't jack off to Crystal from Star Fox Adventures is lying to you." The tweet would receive a lot of likes and retweets. People thought it was funny, but not Feminist Frequency, founded by infamous feminist games journalist Anita Sarkeesian. They couldn't just let him make this joke in peace and without trying to make a shoehorned political point. Nobody in our office feels that way about Crystal. In fact, we find her character deeply disappointing. Here's why. And then they linked a YouTube video, which I'm not gonna watch. She's literally trapped in a crystal. Finding a female character who's damseled and stripped of her agency arousing is kinda gross, to be honest. Attitudes like this are indicative of just how male-dominated gaming culture remains. Newsflash, we don't care about your boners. Such a bizarre series of tweets to make. Twitter users found this pushback from Feminist Frequency to be bizarre and started making jokes about it. The mental image of someone running around their office seriously asking everyone, "Is Crystal from Star Fox hot?" is fucking hilarious. Everyone in my office masturbates to Crystal from Star Fox. We haven't done any work in weeks. While this controversy is minor compared to what happens next, it does showcase one thing. Nick's style of tweeting isn't liked by people in his industry. It tends to be snarky and has an edge to it, contrast to how he acts in videos. The scandal began on August 3rd, 2017. On the 2nd, Robinson would begin a thread on Twitter criticizing the Nintendo Switch port of Overcooked. Robinson's tweets would be controversial due to them being very hostile. One of the complaints in the thread he would make would be that the game devs asked him to take a video of their game not working. And then this would spark Twitter user Bloody Honey to write the following tweet the next day. Maybe Nick would have time to help the Overcooked devs out if he wasn't in every woman in games DMs all the time. And then a bunch of people started talking. Apparently, everyone secretly knew Nick was actually a bad guy. But instead of just gathering evidence and coming about it, normally, they all waited for him to complain about a game on Twitter and then decided to dunk on him. I guess Overcooked didn't send nudes. Following this, there would be vague tweets from people in the industry referring to Nick, sometimes by name and sometimes not. Within a day, collaborators started severing ties. Outside of Polygon, Nick took part in a podcast called The Pod Burglars, alongside Matt Kessler and Ben Pack. Matt would come out claiming he was fucking furious, done with the show, and offered numerous apologies. Ben Pack would come out later. His tweets would be more tame and respectful than Matt's, but he too was siding against Nick Robinson. Over at Polygon, two of the McElroy brothers, including Griffin, would also come out against Nick the same day. Both claimed to be shocked, angry, and sad about it all. They, alongside many others, criticized those looking for receipts and evidence of Nick's alleged bad behavior. Remember, this was around the height of Me Too. Not only did many average people at the time buy into the automatically believe all women thing, but also the industry Nick was a part of was very progressive, so he had an uphill battle to fight here. Chris Grant of Vox Media would announce he was taking the allegations very seriously, and Nick had been suspended pending a thorough Vox Media inquiry. With all of this going on, two prominent threads would be created to talk about the situation. One on infamous left-wing gaming forum NeoGAF, and one on a certain controversial internet drama forum. One day into the drama, there was no evidence against Nick Robinson, or really any specific claims of what he did that was bad. It was literally all posts from people in or adjacent to the industry excommunicating him for being an alleged bad guy. One user on the drama forum would write 2 days into the controversy on the 5th of August, "I've read every word of this thread and I still don't know what he's been accused of." Some users on NeoGAF who thought it was a bit too extreme for this to be happening to Nick over he said, she said stuff on Twitter were criticized by other users. They were called fence-sitters and told to believe victims. Then you had those who thought Nick might have been guilty, but he shouldn't be shunned, rather rehabilitated. These people were also met with criticism from other forum users. The NeoGAF thread is almost entirely against Nick from what I read. The drama website thread is somewhat sympathetic towards him, although some weren't, and claimed he deserved this treatment for associating with Polygon. A good portion of the thread is just mocking the people accusing Nick. While Nick was quiet and the vague allegation of wrongdoing was amiss, he was losing followers. Despite no evidence, he had already lost around 4,000 followers. The first piece of quote-unquote evidence would come out later that day, and it was basically nothing. It's just cringy flirting between two adults. The woman who would supply these screenshots, Madeline, claimed she was 18 at the time this occurred and that Nick wasn't a predator, but she thought it was sus. He apparently wanted to keep their relationship quiet. All any of this proves is Nick would pursue people on his main verified Twitter account. Also on the same day, screenshots from another woman, Elia Cat, would be released. These screenshots show Nick and Elia discussing her receiving some free merchandise from him. Nick then sent an optical illusion that says, "Send nudes." Nick and her would then have a little back and forth, and that's it. When posting these, Elia claims this interaction made her feel weird, although adding it wasn't unnecessarily unsolicited. Elia continued to tweet, saying she wasn't sure that Nick deserved to lose his job over what happened between them, and it more so depended on the scale on what he was doing with other women. Later on, going to state she actually felt bad for coming out because Nick was her friend, although she maintained he was persistent in his advances. We'll come back to Elia, although before we move on, it's important to state Elia was never a fan of Nick, and she was 23. Elia and Nick were in the same friend group, that's how they met. Elia was a fan of Nick's brother, Porter Robinson, however, judging by this tweet she made months before the scandal. Unlike the previous woman, she claims to have actually had sex with Nick. It wasn't just flirting on Twitter. The next day on the 6th, Madeline would take to Reddit to issue a longer statement. She goes on to state she wasn't a victim and she had also sent him lewd photos. It wasn't just flirting. She criticizes Nick for pursuing her at the age of 18 while he was 26, and that Nick going through his Twitter replies to find girls is pathetic. Madeline also claims other women who had experiences with Nick reached out to her, but she doesn't say what those experiences were. were. Even more allegations would then be made. One random Twitter user, LupFucker69, a very reliable source, claimed Nick solicited nudes from 16-year-olds when he was 21, and he had done more than just that. To be clear, this is just a random person with no evidence giving a second-hand account. Their quote-unquote proof that what they are saying is legit is, since some people disavowed Nick, that's all the evidence you need to believe LupFucker69. Yeah, I don't know about that. I'd also like to point out this tweet isn't cited in any mainstream media article about the scandal. This wasn't the first person to claim Nick had pursued underage girls. A tweet that might have come out prior to Bloody Honeys claimed Nick had creeped on multiple friends of his that were underage girls while Nick was fully aware. Although this tweet went nowhere, unlike Bloody Honeys. Like the previous underage allegation, it's not referenced in any mainstream media article, and it's not mentioned in a lot of independent reports about the situation either. In 2021, commentary YouTuber Sino is away would reach out regarding these tweets, and he would be met with them getting deleted. This is why I didn't mention this specific tweet till now. Surprisingly, for a scandal completely based off of Twitter hearsay, none of these articles mentioned the underage allegations, like I just said, or other serious allegations we will get to soon. They only mention sexual misconduct or harassment claims. I honestly have no idea why. Before we continue, also on the 6th, there would be 2 sideshows regarding the scandal. The giant NeoGAF thread about the situation would be shut down. This is due to the thread apparently devolving into a debate about Donald Trump, because of course it did, it's NeoGAF. Another one being popular Twitter user MomBot would use the Nick Robinson scandal to fake DMs of a popular left-wing user, 9volt. The fake DMs show him non-consensually asking about her feet. MomBot left these up for 6 hours before admitting they were fake. MomBot claims they did this to show what was happening to Nick Robinson was unfair, and that you shouldn't immediately believe DMs. 9volt didn't seem very thrilled about this. People still sometimes mention these fake feet DMs when discussing 9volt to this day. On the 7th, popular commentators and shows would start releasing content about the situation. Waypoint Radio, a podcast advice, would release an episode about it. They claimed Nick's alleged antics were an open secret among people in the industry, and that even one of the hosts had heard things before. YouTuber ReviewTech USA would release a popular video about the subject. He would take a centrist approach. He didn't try and exonerate Nick, but was critical of how the whole situation was going down. He raised some fair points, like why were these allegations first dumped onto Twitter rather than being taken to Chris Grant and Vox Media for an investigation? Why were women who had come out during all of this and claimed to have relations with Nick, such as Madeline, now deleting their online presence? ReviewTech USA also asked the question, what power did Nick Robinson have? A repeated talking point against Nick was he abused his power and used his fans to achieve sex. But does being a video producer at a video game news website actually bring you power over anyone? Nick Robinson wasn't a politician or anything. He was probably making like sub $100,000 a year. On the 8th, Nick Robinson was caught streaming the Lil Uzi Vert song, Erase Your Social, which is a great song, by the way. It was one of my most streamed this year. The song contains the lyrics, like flex on you haters, ho. Hi haters, this is my world, soul is all in my favor. I like all girls, yeah, all types of flavors. Oh, this is terrible. Some of Nick's most passionate critics have used this against him to prove his guilt or something, I don't know. On August 10th, Nick Robinson would finally respond with a statement and apology. Along with this, he said he would be taking a break.
I messed up and I owe you an explanation. Over 9 years on this website being Twitter, I've used it for every aspect of my life, making friends, finding jobs, and yes, embarrassingly, flirting. This means I have, on many occasions, used Twitter to hit on people. That's embarrassing enough on its own, as it's now clear that some of these advances were unwanted or handled very poorly, but there's another significant issue. While my platform and my responsibilities grew, I failed to grow alongside them. Over the past couple years, I kept on using Twitter the same way I always have, including quote-unquote sliding into DMs, a move that carries an entirely different weight when you're a private individual versus when you're a public one. Not that long ago, I had an extremely small following online. I never imagined I'd someday be getting messages from people about how the silly stuff I've made has pulled them out of a dark place or affected them positively. I certainly never imagined there'd be a fan art with my dumb face on it. All that I say to this, I'm now, as weird as it sounds, in a position of power, but I'm ashamed to admit that until the past few days, I hadn't appreciated the responsibility that brings. I'll admit that when this conversation first started, I was defensive and confused. I've always tried to be a thoughtful, considerate person when it comes to this stuff and couldn't understand what was going on. But the more I thought about it, the more I understood where people were coming from. I believe that when someone says you've hurt them or made them uncomfortable, the right thing to do is not to argue, it's to listen. What I always thought of as flirting can quickly become something more insidious when one of the people is in a position of power. I totally failed to recognize this. I've spent the past week doing little besides reflecting on my own behavior. I'm embarrassed, obviously, but more than embarrassed, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to anyone I've ever made feel uncomfortable with my advances, and I'm sorry for disappointing fans of mine who, rightfully, expected better from me. I know I've let you down, and I know it falls on me to earn back your trust by changing my behavior going forward. That's exactly what I intend to do.
Minutes after responding, Chris Grant would announce that Vox Media and Nick were parting ways effective immediately, and that Chris wished Nick the best. The statement had a mixed reaction. I honestly think everyone's stance on it literally just depended on where they stood politically on Me Too. People who were pro Me Too attacked Nick and thought what he said wasn't good enough. People who stood more in the middle thought it was a good apology and that the allegations he was responding to weren't as serious as some were acting like they were. Like, yeah, he did some awkward flirting with people he probably shouldn't have been doing it with, although it's not irredeemable and makes him an evil person. And then there were those who thought he did no wrong and had no idea why he was even apologizing to begin with. On a Reddit post sharing the statement, someone would make a burner account claiming to work in the industry and with Nick. They claimed quite a few things, the most out there being he nearly raped someone, and he was also reaching out to people to keep them quiet. Now, this was something almost no one ever reported on, as it's a burner account making unsubstantiated claims on Reddit. But there's this migraine-inducing document called the Nick Robinson case file. Some people like the site, and this Reddit account is listed in there, so I figured I'd mention it. Elliot Cat would issue multiple responses. The one quoted in articles is a tweet in which she claims and complains Nick used women as sex objects and then ghosted them and offered them half-assed apologies. What these articles don't show is the tweet where she furthers the underage claim and her other responses to the situation that come across as interesting, to say the least. Hours after Nick was let go, she texted him and released what she sent to him. The text reads, "Don't respond, but fuck you. You literally used me, and I know you're emotionally intelligent enough to know exactly what you were doing. Your apologies were bullshit. You didn't change, and you use your platform to use women as sex objects. You're only famous because you're a cis white boy with opinions and enough money to play a stupid amount of games. Fuck you. I hate you. You think I didn't know you cheated, redacted, or your horrible reputation. You don't get fired for fucking flirting." And on the 11th, she said men shouldn't cross her because she'll ruin their lives. Now, this is very puzzling. When there were vague rumors about Nick, Elia became one of the only women to publicly come out and make a claim against him. And her claim against him was he sent her a meme that made her feel weird, but admit it wasn't unnecessarily unsolicited. She has now contradicted herself multiple times, at first claiming she was on the fence about whether he should lose his job, then saying she felt bad about coming out about this, and then taking credit for ruining his life. and sending a fuck you text to him. I mean, sure, you can say the third time is a result of her discovering other allegations and believing them outright, but she's going to sorta try and rewrite history about what happened here and contradict herself once again later down the line. Also notice how in her fuck you mask off text and other statements following the alleged firing, she never mentions any of the sexual misconduct claims. She's only talking about how he used her and other women for sex, and he ghosted them afterwards. While that's shitty to do, none of that is a crime. 2 new allegations were made in this text, one being he's a cheater, and the other being he was actually fired. Before we move on, I want to address that allegation. She claims Nick was fired, contradicting what Grant said in his tweet. I've even seen some people with some clout in the industry claim Vox Media investigated Nick and found all of the allegations to be true, and that they actually fired him, but I'm skeptical of that claim. If I had an employee I had found guilty of sexual harassment, engaging sexually with underage girls while fully knowing they were underage, and attempting to rape someone, I would not publicly go and say I wished them the best and that we were simply parting ways, but that's just me. What happened to Nick Robinson following his exile from Polygon? Well, one drama forum user predicted it almost perfectly. He would go independent on YouTube and somewhat wiggle his way back into the industry later down the line. Nick is now bigger than ever, and most likely, he now makes more money off of his independent stuff than what he made at Polygon years ago. While being disavowed by people you were fans of and were fortunate to then work with does suck, at least you get to have the memories of making content with them and entertaining the same audience you were once a part of. And it seems Nick picked himself up rather quickly, judging by this photo posted of him a week after his statement was released. As I mentioned earlier, in January 2021, YouTuber Sino Is Away would make a commentary video going over the allegations. What I didn't mention earlier was most of the comments on the video seem supportive of Nick. In July 2021, Nick Robinson would hit the 1 million subscriber milestone. Because of Nick's continued success, some people in the game industry are still actively trying to destroy him. They still write articles and tweet about the situation, even to this very day. If Nick Robinson makes a viral tweet, they immediately show up to quote tweet and remind everyone of the scandal from years ago. Although this effort doesn't seem to be very effective. In later years, a rumor got circulated that Nick uses alternative accounts on Twitter to argue with people who bring up the allegations. The evidence cited is a user named Thon. Their first tweet ever made from their account was a reply defending Nick to someone attacking him. I mean, sure, that is suspicious, but it appears when Thon proved he wasn't Nick by doing a live stream, the person who made the claim that Nick uses alt accounts to argue with people called him a motherfucker and apparently blocked him. So I'm not feeling too confident about that claim. And despite that, you'll still see this claim made against Nick sometimes. It's always entirely possible Nick is using alternative accounts, pretending to be random Twitter users to defend himself, although it's all speculation. Following the scandal, Elliot Cat would still sometimes tweet about Nick. In September 2017, she would continue to push the underage allegation, and also claimed if she saw him, she would assault him. In December of 2017, she discussed how Nick was decent regarding consent stuff when she was drunk. In March 2018, she made a thread trying to clear up misinformation regarding the situation. In this thread, she is blatantly disingenuous. While it's technically true she never called for him to be fired, when Nick parted ways, she gloated about it and took credit for it. In May 2018, she made tweets implying there are things the public still doesn't know about. In March 2019, she said the reason more women didn't come out is because they were afraid of getting doxxed and harassed, which Elia Cat was following what she said after Nick and Polygon parted ways. At one point, she would also attack a girlfriend of Nick's. Apparently, Nick's girlfriend had defended Nick regarding the claims on Twitter. Elia said she was sure the current girl would hate him in a few months, and that was all she was going to say regarding it. Then, a few months later in June, she continued to complain about what Nick's girlfriend said. And that's all the important Elia Nick Robinson lore I was able to dig up and that I thought was worth mentioning. I have no idea what happened to the Madeline girl. Looking at all the available evidence, Nick Robinson to me just comes off as a guy who's a womanizer and bad at flirting. There's no evidence to support the more out there claims that were made, and all of those come from mostly random people on Twitter and Reddit. For the main claim pushed, the sexual harassment claim, the evidence is very weak. The DMs out there just show some awkward flirting. When people spoke out and said he made them uncomfortable, he apologized and said he didn't mean to. I think intent in what people do is very important. And none of the DMs show Nick had bad intentions. His response isn't apologizing for sexual harassment, it's apologizing for being awkward and for what he felt was an abuse of his power to try and have sex with fans through his Twitter account. I personally don't really see the issue with using your minor internet fame to try to talk to women. A lot of people who do media have relationships with other people in the media or people who are fans of them, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. Although I don't really fault Nick for feeling like he shouldn't have done it, judging by the mess it made for him. Some people still claim he's guilty of the worst, and that the public isn't owed any definitive, supposed secret proof that's out there somewhere. To be clear to everyone watching this, there's always the possibility he is guilty of doing bad stuff. But because I haven't been shown any smoking gun evidence or any serious proof, I'm led to believe Nick isn't a bad guy. It's been half a decade since the scandal happened. I think the situation is over, and all that's been said by those involved has been said. If something ever changes, I'll be sure to follow up in another video or on a statement on my social media. I don't really know how to end this video, so thank you for watching, and yeah. Bye.